What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Barely Legal in Web3. I'm your host, Jamilia Grier, bringing you the latest in Web3 every week with a legal twist. So hold on to your digital wallets and let's get into it. It feels incredible to be back behind the mic. First off, let me dive straight into the elephant in the room. We've been on a bit of a break for the past few months, and you might have wondered where we disappeared to. As you all know, the Web3 space is fast moving, and we decided to step back, regroup, and think about how to restructure the show in a way to bring more value to you as listeners. So gone are the guest interviews of yesteryears. This season, we're bringing you a snappier, punchier format. Twice a week, I'll dive deep into the Web3 world from a legal compliance lens. Think information-packed episodes, fiery hot takes, and bold predictions. And the best part, we're wrapping all that goodness in just 5 to 10 minutes. Bite-sized, but trust me, big on value. So before anything else, a huge thank you to all of you, to those who've been with Barely Legal in Web3 from the start, and to our new listeners, you are in for a treat. So I'm genuinely grateful for each and every one of you. Also, we want this journey to be interactive. Have a burning Web3 legal question or maybe a hot take you're itching to share? Reach out to me on Twitter at Jamilia Grier, send me a DM, or at me on a story where you think it would make sense to have my legal take. So thanks again for sticking with us. Now let's dive into today's episode. All right, to kick things off, let's talk about a project that's been causing quite a stir in the Web3 space, Worldcoin. And this is something that, as soon as this project came up, I wanted to talk about it. If you haven't heard of it yet, Worldcoin is a very ambitious project aiming to distribute a new global cryptocurrency to essentially every person on Earth. Yes, that is their goal, to distribute it to basically every person on Earth. And at its core, Worldcoin is built on this belief that in order for a cryptocurrency to be truly universal, it has to be owned by everyone. So yes, and here's where it gets even more futuristic. They've developed an orb-shaped device that scans your eyes. Specifically, it scans your iris, which is supposedly unique to each individual, more so even than your fingerprints. And by doing this, they ensure that each person can only register once. So that's their way to try to prevent fraud and ensure this fair distribution. So Worldcoin has been traveling around the world with these orbs and their volunteers in public places, and really trying to rally people to scan their iris and to get on board with this new global cryptocurrency. And in exchange for signing up, i.e. getting your iris scanned, they are giving a share of their cryptocurrency for free. So it creates this situation where people are, obviously they want the free cryptocurrency, but in exchange to get it, they have to give up a bit of their privacy. So I think it's super intriguing. If you've been following the blog on ByteBao, back in April of last year, I called it. I said there's a huge gap between privacy expectations and the basic tenets of Web3. This idea of transparency is great for Web3, but when we get into the applications, when we get into the use cases in how the technology will be used, we will start to see more and more use cases that are in contradiction of this idea of privacy, because the technology is to be transparent. Worldcoin has been tweeting about their progress and how they're able to collect iris data and how they're able to use this iris data to create an iris code. On August 7th, they tweeted, "By default, iris images are promptly deleted by the orb after the creation of the iris code, all without ever leaving the device." So I think it's so important to sort of pause and think about what these large Web3 companies are trying to get you to believe and trying to get you to sort of understand, and then to take that and compare it with the way that data actually works. So what they're trying to say by this is that we are deleting your iris images after they're scanned. So you don't have to worry. You don't have to worry about anything. We have your iris image. It's deleted after the creation of the code, and nothing even leaves the device. So I guess I'm kind of a data geek, even though I'm a lawyer. And, one of the things that's really interesting about data and codes is this idea that if you have a base image like an iris or a base code and you're using it to create something else, there's always the chance of reverse engineering. There's always the chance that with an iris code, someone could potentially, or some technology could potentially reverse engineer an iris image. And this is why it's so important for people who are, considering having their iris scanned to really think about, well, what happens to my image? Yes, it's deleted, but what could also happen with this new code that is created from my iris image? And this is only part of the argument, right? Privacy regulations like GDPR and California's privacy laws and Singapore's Privacy Data Protection Act, all of these laws have been, combed over for years now to protect consumers into really understanding what happens to their data. And I think what we're seeing in Web3 is we're now at a point where companies are becoming more and more sophisticated in getting ahead of the way that the basic population understands how data is used. So, for example, if you go to a Marriott and you fill out a form that says, I have a nut allergy, that's medical data. You know how it's going to be used. They're just not going to put nuts on your welcome tray when you come into the room. Fine, right? And they'll tell you that. And that's easy to understand, right? But when you have your iris scanned to create an iris code, and you're told that your iris image will be deleted, there's not really much understanding after that about the code and about the technology behind it. And I think we're really at a point where the regulations, while they're there and they have great intent, they might not be as sophisticated enough to protect consumers in terms of making sure consumers understand how their data is being used. Kenya, for example, has been keeping its eyes on Worldcoin. On August 2nd, they launched an investigation and they actually went in and seized these orbs that Worldcoin is using to scan the irises. And they said essentially, we need to look further into this to see if it's what we actually want in our country. A UK regulator has issued a similar warning, and countries all around the world are really starting to question whether or not Worldcoin is doing something that they want. That being said, I will end on this final note that Worldcoin is not even available in the US. Worldcoin themselves have stated that the tokens are not intended to be available for use, purchase, or access by US persons. And that should give you a bit of insight as to the company's own thoughts about whether or not it is compliant ethically with what it's doing. All right, Web3 enthusiasts, that's a wrap for today's episode. If you come across any Web3 news or insights that you think deserve some spotlight on the show, don't be a stranger. Shoot me a tweet at Jamilia Grier, and let's bring those stories to the forefront together. And hey, if you're hungry for more in-depth analysis and fresh takes, make sure to check out my content over on LinkedIn and dive into the wealth of knowledge over at ByteBao Insights. For those of you that are new to ByteBao, we're a legal consulting firm specializing in Web3 and emerging tech. So stay curious, stay informed, and until next time, keep pushing those digital boundaries. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to today's episode. I appreciate when you guys tune in and the time that you take to listen to the show and support us. And I have one thing that I'd love for you to do that would really help us out, which is rate the show. If you've enjoyed it, make sure you rate it. You can do it on whatever platform you're listening on. That would do wonders for us. And if you really want to be a super fan and really support the show, there's a link below that you can support us and donate a small monthly contribution, which allows us to continue to create great content for you. Thanks so much again. Appreciate you and see you next time.